At first, everything seemed perfect. I had a beautiful wife, a nice house, and a solid group of friends. My best friend Jordan had been by my side for years, more like a brother than a friend. We'd go way back, sharing everything from old childhood memories to our adult dreams. But life wasn't as simple as it seemed. Behind the perfect picture, things were starting to feel off, and I couldn't shake that feeling. For a while, I'd noticed little things, subtle changes in how my wife Laura was acting around Jordan. I thought I was overthinking it. After all, we had a good marriage. We'd been together for a long time, and things had always felt comfortable between us. But there was something about the way she would laugh a little too loudly at his jokes, or how she'd touch his arm just a little longer than necessary, that started to get under my skin. It wasn't anything I could outright accuse her of, but it was enough to make me uneasy. If these stories resonate with you, subscribe to Confession Cabin and join our community. Share your experiences in the comments. Your voice could bring comfort to someone who needs it. Jordan had always been a good friend. He'd been there for me through thick and thin, and I trusted him with everything. He was practically family. But the more time they spent together, the more I began to feel like there was something between them that I wasn't seeing. I had always prided myself on being the kind of guy who trusted his wife and friends without question, but now that trust was starting to waver. One afternoon, I found myself sitting in the living room, watching them interact. It was subtle, but it was there. The way Laura's eyes lingered on Jordan a little too long. The way their conversation seemed to carry an undertone that I couldn't quite place. It wasn't like they were doing anything obvious, no blatant flirting or secret meetings, but I could feel the tension in the room. There was something unspoken between them, something that didn't sit right with me. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe I was just projecting my own insecurities onto them. After all, we'd been friends for years, and I knew Jordan well enough to trust him. But that nagging feeling wouldn't go away. The more I tried to ignore it, the more it seemed to fester in the back of my mind. For a while, I convinced myself I was just overthinking things. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I didn't know what it was yet, but I couldn't shake the feeling that everything wasn't as perfect as it appeared. That nagging feeling would only grow stronger in the days to come, eventually leading me to a truth I wasn't prepared for. It started with the way they would look at each other, long, lingering glances that made me uncomfortable. I brushed it off the first few times, but there was one incident that I couldn't ignore. I came home early from work one afternoon and found them alone in the living room. The air was thick, and the tension was palpable. Jordan was sitting on the couch, and Laura was standing too close to him. I caught them mid-laugh, but something about it felt wrong. Their conversation stopped abruptly when I entered the room, and both of them quickly shifted uncomfortably. I told myself it was nothing, just a weird moment. But the seed of doubt had been planted in my mind. Something was definitely off, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. Over the next few days, the unease only grew. I noticed more and more moments where their interactions seemed a little too familiar. When we would all hang out together, they had this dynamic that felt almost intimate. The way their voices softened when they spoke to each other, the way they shared inside jokes that I wasn't even a part of anymore. It all made me feel like I was on the outside looking in. At first, I thought it was just me, that I was being paranoid. But the more I observed, the more I realized that my gut was telling me something wasn't right. One evening after Jordan had left, I tried to talk to Laura about it. It wasn't easy, and I didn't know how to bring it up without sounding accusatory, but I had to know. I needed her to explain to me why things felt off. She reassured me, laughing it off as nothing, just the way they'd always been. But I didn't buy it. It was more than just their usual friendship. It was like there was something simmering underneath the surface, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I spent the next few days second-guessing myself, trying to rationalize everything. I didn't want to believe that my wife, the woman I loved and trusted, would betray me in such a way. But the doubts kept creeping in, becoming more persistent with each passing moment. I found myself scrutinizing every glance, every touch, every word exchanged between them. And each time it felt like there was something more to their friendship than they were letting on. It wasn't until one particular night, when I caught them laughing together a little too loudly and standing too close, that the truth became undeniable. There was something there, something deeper than I could have imagined. It wasn't just friendship anymore. It was something else, something that made my heart ache with betrayal. I didn't know what to do with this new realization, but I knew one thing for sure: things were never going to be the same again. It wasn't until a week later that the truth finally came crashing down. I came home one night and noticed Laura's phone on the counter, unlocked, with a text message popping up on the screen. Normally I would respect her privacy, but in that moment I couldn't help myself. I picked up the phone and what I saw made my blood run cold. The messages between her and Jordan were more than just friendly. There were flirtations, inside jokes, and then a message I'll never forget: "I can't wait to see you tonight." My stomach dropped. I felt betrayed, humiliated. The very two people I trusted most had been hiding this secret from me. And to make matters worse, Jordan had been coming to my house under the guise of being my best friend, all while sneaking around behind my back with my wife. My hands started to tremble as I read the messages over and over, each word burning into my mind. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. How could they do this to me? How could she betray me in such a hurtful way with someone I considered family? Every part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I wasn't ready. The shock was too overwhelming. I put the phone down, pacing the room, trying to wrap my mind around everything. I felt a mix of anger, confusion, and deep sadness. My head was spinning. All the signs I'd seen, the looks, the touches, the closeness now made sense, but that didn't make it hurt any less. In fact, it made it worse. I felt like I had been blind to something so obvious. All this time I had trusted her, and now everything felt like a lie. I stayed up that night, unable to sleep, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do now? Confront her? Walk away? I didn't have the answers, and that uncertainty gnawed at me. But one thing was clear: I couldn't keep living in this illusion of trust. The person I thought I knew and loved was no longer the woman I saw in front of me. She was someone who had broken that trust in the worst possible way. I didn't know when I'd be ready to face her, but I knew one thing: this was the turning point. I couldn't go back to pretending everything was fine. The truth was out, and it was staring me right in the face, impossible to ignore. What was once my safe, perfect world had shattered in an instant, and now I had to figure out how to pick up the pieces. Confronting them was the hardest thing I've ever done. I didn't know whether to feel angry, heartbroken, or just numb. When I confronted them, it felt like the world was crashing down around me. Laura admitted to everything, but there was no apology, no remorse. She didn't even seem to care that she had broken the trust between us. And Jordan, he just sat there silent, looking away. The anger surged through me in waves. I had so many questions, so many things I wanted to scream at them, but the words wouldn't come. How could they do this to me? Why would they betray me like this, with each other, in my own home? I thought we were a family, that Jordan was more than just a friend. He was supposed to be someone I could trust with anything. And here he was, sitting in front of me, as if nothing had changed. The betrayal stung in ways I didn't know were possible. Laura tried to justify it, explaining how their connection had grown over time, but none of her words made sense to me. She said she was sorry, but it didn't feel like a real apology. It was more like a statement of fact, as if she was simply acknowledging the damage, not trying to make amends. Her face didn't show regret, just a strange indifference. I could see she was more focused on defending herself than on understanding the depth of what she had done. Jordan didn't speak much. His guilt was written all over his face, but there was something else too: shame. He couldn't even look me in the eye. I wanted to scream at him, to demand answers. How long had this been going on? How could he look me in the face for years and lie to me? But I couldn't bring myself to say anything. The betrayal from both of them was too much. It felt like I was suffocating in the weight of it all. I couldn't stay in the same room with them. I couldn't bear to look at them any longer. I told them to leave, but there was no anger in my voice, just exhaustion. It was as if the very essence of my trust had been stripped away, leaving me hollow. They left quietly, not saying a word, and I was left alone in the silence of my broken home. The emptiness that followed was suffocating. I kept replaying everything in my mind: the looks, the laughter, the lies. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, that maybe it wasn't as bad as it seemed, but I knew deep down that it was. Everything had changed in an instant, and I couldn't unsee it. It's been months since everything went down, and I'm still processing it all. I've distanced myself from both Laura and Jordan. The pain hasn't gone away, but it's easier to handle now that I've had time to reflect. I've learned that betrayal doesn't just come from the outside, it can come from the people you trust most. The days after the confrontation were a blur. At first, I didn't know how to function. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and every time I tried to go about my day, my mind kept returning to the same hurtful thoughts. I thought about the moments when I thought everything was fine, when I laughed and joked with Jordan, when I trusted Laura with my heart, only for all of that to be shattered. I'd stare at the empty space in the house where they used to sit, and I couldn't help but wonder how much of everything was real. Eventually, I started putting distance between myself and the world I once knew. I moved out of the house for a while, staying with a friend who had no idea what I was going through. At first, I didn't want to tell anyone. I didn't want to hear their judgment or their pity. I wasn't ready for that. But the more time I spent alone, the more I realized I needed help. The weight of everything was starting to drag me down, and I couldn't carry it on my own anymore. Slowly, I began seeing a therapist, talking about it, even in vague terms. Felt like I was taking back some control. I could feel the anger start to soften, though the hurt never completely disappeared. There was a part of me that felt like I would never trust anyone again. How could I, after what happened? But with time, I started to understand that the betrayal wasn't my fault. I had trusted the wrong people, and I had given them the benefit of the doubt when I shouldn't have. I still think about Laura and Jordan from time to time. I wonder if they're still together, if they feel the same weight of their actions as I do. I wonder if they even regret what happened. But then I remind myself that I can't control their feelings. I can't force them to feel remorse. What I can control is my own healing. I've learned that time doesn't erase the pain, but it does make it bearable. I've stopped obsessing over what happened and started focusing on rebuilding myself. I'm not the person I was before all of this, but I'm stronger now. I've learned that trust is something that takes time to rebuild, and right now I need to rebuild it within myself. Maybe one day I'll be able to forgive them. But for now, the scars remain, a reminder of what I went through and how I survived it. Life moves on, and so must I.